Theseus, son of Aegeus, son of Poseidon, dwelt in Athens at the time the 9th year tribute was to be fulfilled. The ruler of Crete, King Minos, having defeated the Athenians in battle, demanded human sacrifices be provided to feed the monster, the Minotaur, who had the body of a man, head of a bull, and was so ferocious it had to be kept in a special prison called the Labyrinth. Built by the clever inventor Daedalus, the labyrinth's winding passages, intricate twists, and turns frustrated the raging Minotaur, thus preventing escape. In Athens, by lottery, 7 young men and 7 maidens were chosen as tribute. Clever, strong, and courageous, Theseus volunteered to sail to Crete in the company of the doomed, vowing in his heart to rid the world of the evil Minotaur. When Theseus arrived in Crete, upon first sight, Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, fell in love with the handsome young man. Along with Daedalus she devised a plan to aid Theseus to kill the Minotaur. She helped Theseus smuggle a sword under his bear-skin cloak, and gave him a spool of silken thread, and took him, in the shadow of the night, to the gateway of the labyrinth. There Ariadne kissed Theseus and wished him the favor of the gods to complete his quest. Once inside, Theseus tied the thread to the door and began to unwind it as his assurance that he would be able to escape from the labyrinth once he had killed the fearsome creature. The Minotaur, smelling the human sacrifice, quickly overtook the hero, and a battle to the death ensued. Theseus struck with his sword and killed the Minotaur, and took the head of the beast as his trophy. Theseus and Ariadne rescued the youth from their prison, and all sailed toward Athens, safe from the cruelties of King Minos of Crete, blessed in their passage across the sea by the favor of Poseidon. Theseus returned a hero of Athens. From the research team of Sheppard and Patrick, I am Karen Christine Patrick, and along with Brett Collins Sheppard, we research anomalous phenomenon on the moon. In recent years, Brett has done a large body of work finding and illuminating embedded holographic images and space agency photographs of the lunar surface. Brett is the founding administrator of the Facebook group, the Lunar Anomaly Research Society, or LARS, and together, we wrote a book about these strange images, and Brett's story, called PARADIMENSIONAL Space Art, Extradimensional Communication in Space Images. This video is about our discovery of a large number of holographic images of ancient legendary figures found in one particular photograph that we were told was taken around 1967 by the mission series called the Lunar Orbiter Program. We continue to discuss what we found in Lunar Orbiter Images 1197 that was taken of a section of the lunar surface on the far side of the moon.
In our first video, The Lament of Daedalus, we talked about finding the Daedalus image, which included the image of Daedalus in Icarus crater, as well as the image of Apollo and some other ones. Brett kept finding other images in the same single photograph, Lunar Orbiter Image 1197. This kind of goes along with what Brett's been doing for a while, which is finding holographic embedded imagery. What happened to you in 1982?
I was in my art class, and it was at the beginning of the class, and in 1982, and my art instructor, he was actually talking to a lady. Her name was Amina Zarita. She asked if he could pull a couple of his best students out of the class to the slideshow presentation that she came to present from Stanford University. And when she started showing these images, I was picked along with my friend Chris, and he had to leave the class. His brother came and got him or something, and he didn't see anything anyway. And I saw everything in these images, discussed them as from various artists, and that she didn't mention that they were on the moon or anything. They were just a slideshow of images, and she asked what we thought about them, or she asked at the time what I thought about them. So I felt sort of singled out, and I just went along with it, and I looked at the images and analyzed them as an artist. What I saw was a lot of very unusual compositions, and they all seemed to be themed. She said, this one's a little risque, but I'll show it anyway, and oh, what do you think about this one? And you know, so I didn't think much about it until much later, when I was looking at lunar images and analyzing lunar images 30 years later. And I started seeing these same images that I saw back in 1982, which kind of tells me that they don't know what these things are or why they are embedded in lunar orbiter images.
Kind of made this assumption just because we know about secret programs of the government where they're able to do time operations, basically. So, you know, I was the one that suggested to you, based on other researchers' experiences, other whistleblowers' experiences, that you were actually shown images of the work that you do now, which is to look at lunar orbiter images, and you see all of these different themes, including these legendary ones that we're showing now in this series. And that basically what happened is you were shown the images in 1982 when you were in high school of the stuff that you're finding now. And that's kind of a weird paranormal, you know, story, and if people want to know more, they can look at our book. You start looking at images of the moon, and at first you find anomalies that most other people find, which are like, you know, buildings and ruins, and then you start seeing these holographic images. You would have on the main view of it, you would have an image, and then when you inverse the colors, you'd have a different image, but it would correlate thematically. What we had been finding was a lot of different characters from mythology. Theseus jumped out very clearly, and then once you saw him up in that corner, we started seeing other characters as well.
Yeah, there was the Minotaur, and we found the guy that was turned into a partridge, you know, that watched Daedalus build Apollo's temple.
Perfect.
And you know, then we were looking close at the image, and on the very next frame of that series of lunar orbiter images, there's the face of Apollo, right inside the Icarus crater where he's giving the wings up.
And the black spot on the other side of Apollo turned out to be what we think is Hades.
Possibly Hades, or the dark side of Apollo.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
So it's a very different thing. And I inversed the image, you know, because I noticed that it looked like there were big white splotches and such, and I know as an artist that means that there's something there. So I inverted it, and the Theseus character just popped out. It was very photorealistic.
Yeah, it looks like a guy standing there.
Yeah, and then you kind of back off a little bit and notice that, you know, Poseidon or Trident, you know, well, Poseidon is this huge figure, you know, that kind of plays off of the Theseus character.
What's Theseus's daddy, or the god daddy, and back in those days you could have two daddies, and we just recently found Theseus's other father, which was Aegeus.
Yeah, Aegeus, a young Aegeus. You know, kind of peeking under a rock or something like that.
And he's nearby the Theseus.
Yeah, he's very nearby. So that area is a very large area of the moon, supposedly. So it seems as though these images are embedded all over the image. You know. Well,
we've been finding a lot.
We've been finding all of them, basically. Most of the characters from the Dacian, Pelagian, Greco-Roman era.
Yeah, that was something that kind of, I have to talk about. We almost feel guided in this. Like basically yesterday you found Aegeus, and the night before I was researching Aegeus because I was, you know, putting this video together. We were talking about Theseus, and that was one of his fathers. And, you know, you don't have any idea what I'm researching. I'm not discussing it with you. And this has happened over and over again. I'm digging through the mythology, and I don't even say anything to you, and you find some guy with a conch shell. He's blowing a conch shell, and you ask me, who's that guy? And I'm like, oh, wow, it's Aegeus. I was just reading about him yesterday. So it's a very odd experience ferreting out these images because we feel guided. At the same time you found the Daedalus image, somebody has sent me a link to the information of the Thracian Dacian Pelagian mythology, which is a bit older than the Greco-Roman. And in that mythology, all of these characters were basically kings. They were god kings. They weren't necessarily just gods or just, mythical kinds of things. And that's why we use the word legend instead of myth, because we found out that there was folk stories and kings lists where these guys were real kings.
Yeah, there's a correlation, between the so-called mythology and these real kings.
Right. So we've been researching, and then there's these little details, just to make the point, we believe that all of this whole theme is human origin based. So there's clues in there, and the details are really strange. Like in the story of Icarus and Daedalus, Icarus has a funeral 3 times, which we thought was really strange.
Yeah.
And we have sort of a narrative as to why that is indicated in the images. In the stories, he was buried by water nymphs in the Sea of Icaria, and in another story he was found by Hercules and was buried by Heracles, and in a third one he was buried by Daedalus. And in our imagery, we find out that the sea nymphs found just his head. So maybe he fell and was decapitated.
Seemingly just kind of grabbing his head
so they
out of the water.
Buried the remains, and then Hercules buried his body. It doesn't say if the head was attached or not, but that would explain why there's another piece, I guess. It's a little bit gross. And then the third would be the memorial service, because supposedly Daedalus builds the temple to Apollo. So here at the end, when we show that it's he's bowing before Apollo, that's the temple he built. So it's a later memorial service. Well, anyway, so these little details really help see that there's a real story here, complicated story.
Yeah, and it does. It has to do with our origins, in particular. And it's not just one tribe's specific origins or something. But also there's other images that depict other tribes, large Earth tribe origins. So there's an image where it'll show, like a lot of African elephants and this and that, and so there's a lot that has to do with the human origin type expression.
And that's all over the whole moon. You've been finding other groups of images that are themed to a different time.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we even want to go into the animation sequence. So if you can describe what was going on, because as you began to look at these, you realize these were stills of an animation. So if you could talk about about that a little bit.
Well, what I did was I took a series of about 8 images of the same area, and I overlaid them as though the lunar orbiter could stop and actually take a film of just one area. And what I noticed was there were things flying on the surface and seemingly through the surface or through like a hologram type effect. And so I have a few shots of that, and there's one that looks kind of like a pyramid, like an all-seeing eye kind of thing, and there seems to be something flying by it or flying out of it.